Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sherry.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Today, Sherry and I are going to complete our tour of Pella in Macedonia by going to the museum that is located dead center in the middle of the site of the old city, the Museum of Pella, with its spectacular artifacts. If you take a tour to Pella, they will start you here at the museum to give you an idea of what types of artifacts and everything associated with the city of Pella. Now, I kind of jumped the gun doing the first part of taking you through the city of Pella, the archaeological ruins. If you notice here on this map, you see where the museum is located in relationships to the city and the palace. Palace areas at the time we were there, which is 2019, was not open to the public, but the rest of the city was. And then here's an aerial view of the same site, showing the town, showing the location of the museum, the city, and then, of course, the palace. And, of course, in ancient times, this whole thing would have been just one area with a wall around it. This aerial shot of the museum shows the building has a rectangular atrium. And this is a reference to the central peristyle courtyard that were actually used in the ancient houses of Pella. Plenty of parking, lots of places to roam. You can go out onto the atriums in several locations. It's hard to get a view of the palace excavation, but you can see the rest of the city. This is the main entrance. You come in, get your tickets. There is a little shop where you can buy some souvenirs. You can also have something to eat as well. There's a little place to sit, and then you can go on into the museum. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures from various locations. So here's one from the upper floors looking down. When you first come into this area, this is one of the thematic areas where they talk about the mosaics that you find at the city of Pella. And as you remember from seeing the last show, most of the originals that were out there were covered over with sand for the winter. So these are, for the most part, are replicas, but they do have some of the originals. And I would point out something to you. Notice that around the mosaics, they have this raised edge. Now, this raised edge, you have to be very careful about it. If you're walking towards it, it's easy. But what happened, Sherry was looking at a portrait on the wall and backed up this particular one here and didn't see that there was an edge. She's just walking backwards. And I tried to get to her in time, but she tripped over it and fell and hit her head on the floor. Fortunately, she was okay, but it was a little bit on the scary side. And then here's a view of some of the other mosaics from another section. And then here's a close-up of now this is not a replica, but this is one of the mosaics that they've brought into this region. And then you can see across on the second level, where I've been taking the pictures from, you can see a variety of other displays. So you leave the theme of the mosaics, and the next thing you do is you go into the area where it has everyday life. And ultimately, you'll end up where the special exhibits are. So now let's go back down to ground level and start looking at some of the displays of everyday life and the military. They have a nice little display of military items. It's very small, but you can see this whole section, and you also see some of the black pottery there. But here's one of the swords from the cemetery that they found. There's one of the helmets from the region. They use a lot of cavalry in Macedonia, so the open face is very important. Then here we have a shot of some arrows. And then this one shows all of the different sling bullets. Some of them are made out of lead, some of them are made out of pottery. They also have the markings of the commander of the unit that is firing them. And sometimes you'll find people will have the name of their city. And then they found this container that was full of all of these silver coins in one of the cemetery burials. Pella was a manufacturing center for a lot of statuary and other types of luxury goods. So here's a couple of displays. Here's a display that shows the molds that were used to make some of the various statuary. And then here's some examples of the quality of the statuary, or some of the female deities. And then here is some of the male figures. And they had larger objects as well as pottery. Now, they didn't have any complete bronze statues, but they had several pieces. You see these arms right here, and then one of a horse's leg, very high quality. Pella's merchandise during the time of Philip and Alexander was just superb. Next we came to a little section on Alexander. So here's one of the statue heads that survived, which was believed to be part of a series of family portraits.
And then here's another one in which we have an artist's rendition of or what Alexander might have looked like as a result of this particular piece of sculpture. Now we come to the section where we have the thematic theme of public life in Pella. Inscriptions, production and commerce, how you transport vases, terracotta figurines, and equipment to make pottery. So here we actually have the foundation of a perfume manufacturer that they have put into the museum. And then in this particular jar, we see miniature bottles of perfume that are then stacked in there, one on top of the other. Next we come to some household objects. Here we have the beautiful blackware that you find for every different purpose. Then here's an array of pottery that is designed for keeping items for cosmetics as well as perfumes and other things in it. And then here's a closer view of one of them where they've taken the lid off and you could store things in them. And of course we have jewelry, and here's a beautiful little bracelet of gold that was found in the cemetery. I've been mentioning cemetery. Well, there's a large cemetery that was excavated on the side of Pella, and here's a picture of the excavation. You can see where the wall, part of the wall is. But you'll find all sorts of burials. For example, here's 2 child burials where they're put into these large urns. And then here we have one that's in kind of a sarcophagus that's laid out straight. And then here's a picture showing there's one burial, and then there's to cover it over, and then there's another burial. And you can see different types of, sometimes they're just put in the ground, sometimes there's a little edging of some sort, there's a container that they're in, sometimes that they're in a piece of pottery. Then here's again another shot of the cemetery, and you see that it's pockmarked. People are being buried in all different places. It's not just one and then on to the next. Sometimes there are layers of them. And then of course you have some that are buried like this. They have a little sarcophagus, but then there's a container holding their ashes on the inside instead of having the full skeleton. So there's quite of an array of different types of burials in the Pella Cemetery, and you will find this throughout Macedonia where there's excavations from the ancient time period. Now Sherry and I went through the whole museum, and some beautiful objects. We've seen similar objects in other museums, and there were a few items that really stood out. But I was wondering, where is the special material that's here? Now they do special exhibits. And here's a picture that I took at the beginning showing the upper level. And where we're headed right now is to this particular spot. Sherry first went in there and said, you have to come in and see this. Now, if you've seen my Mycenaean show or the treasures of Mycenae, you have the famous death masks, the gold masks that were over the bodies that Schliemann excavated. Well, the Macedonians had evidently been doing something similar to that for a long time. And what you have in that room is a set of nobles, warriors, possibly kings, and princesses. And when we were there, again, remember 2019, the men were on one side, the women were on the other. And sometimes this goes on display in other places. So here are the royal burials or the warrior burials. So here's one. You see, look at the iron sword. And the items underneath the mask are items that were found in the burial with him. Then you move on to the next one. In this case, we have the mouth covered and the eye slit is open. Beautiful gold. So you see the belt, again a sword. It has what looks like a little toy figure. Then we move on. This one is pretty much the whole face is open with figures down below. Again, the helmets are basically the same style. And here we have one where we have the gold piece over the mouth. Another one with a sword figures. And here we want to have one with part of his shield that still survived, part of a spear. Again, they all have their swords. Beautiful two-handed drinking container. But in this case, notice the gold. He has little eye indentations, a nose, and a mouth. So it's quite different. This one has a gold belt, other gold accoutrements, magnificent mask here of gold. Then we have one again has part of his shield and the eye coverings of gold with the mouthpiece. And then here we have one where we have another mouthpiece, a little spear on the wall. And we have another one where the face is fully covered and we have the nose and the eyes and a mouth, kind of a scimitar style blade here. And then here's one with just the lower jaw. All of these are just stunning. And then this is the last one. So those are the warriors or noblemen, possibly a king or two in there. So that was quite extensive, but the material that we're coming up next for the princesses is just gorgeous. Now we come to the ladies of wealth, princesses, what have you. Now I put them here in 2 by 2. You have in this one, look at the necklaces, that full face mask with kind of a little diadem around the head, and lots of figurines, cosmetic jars. There's a silver container, and then over next to that one is again, more jewelry, lesser objects in that particular woman's tomb. Then in the next sequence, again, lots of pottery in the ladies' tombs, with lots of this one has headband, a mouth covering of gold. Since they don't have a helmet, that's what we end up with, is the facial covering. Necklaces, another full face mask here. This section, again, full face mask, very large full face mask. Look at the lengths of necklace that are here, and all sorts of pottery down below. There's the next one. This one doesn't have as much accoutrements, but other than the cooking material. But again, another mask over the face. And then here is the last one showing very large pieces of gold. Again, another diadem over the head, face mask, necklace, and the final one, which has a little different style of pottery and some smaller pieces of gold. But again, they have usually a head covering of some sort, and their face, their mouth usually covered. So it's quite an interesting burial. Now, there were about 8 of us in the whole group, but basically just Sherry and I went up to see the princesses and the warriors material. I guess they were kind of tired. I tried to convince them, but they'd rather do something else. So we had one other thing here. I wanted to show you this beautiful wreath for around the head of solid gold that you see in Philip the Great's tomb and other kingly tombs. So it's very common to find that amongst the upper classes in different styles. And then once we finished in the museum, we went back out to our vehicle to head on out. Now, obviously, since I did it in the opposite order, we came to the museum first and then went to Pella. And then after that, we went to Vergina to the tomb of Philip, which is where we are headed next, by the way. But the tour group is Ammon Tours. And the one thing about Ammon Tours from up there in Thessaloniki is they have a policy that if only 2 people sign up, that's all that go. They don't cancel it. We actually had our original group cancel on us when we arrived, and then I had to find another one. I was really fortunate to find another group, but it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed tour through the museum at Pella. Sherry and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.